Good, good evening, Opimians. This is not a usual tasting, and I'll talk about that. But as usual, we'll wait as everybody comes in from the waiting room, and yeah, so we'll wait for the people coming in from the waiting room. And unfortunately, if Paul is here, I'm not going to tell a bad joke tonight, so I apologize for that in advance. And this is a very exciting tasting for us, given that you're going to get to try these wines. So we'll wait another minute or two. We have over 50 people coming into the call, and the people at Karlo Estates feverishly sent out these wines to you. and most of them got there. And I see Greg Reinhardt has joined us. Hi, Greg. Our othering managing director. Oh, I think he has. There he is. He's back. Hi, Greg. Hi, Jerry. And hello to a lot of other people I recognize, but I won't say you all individually because it would take us all night. We wouldn't be able to taste any wine, and that would be a bad thing. So Anais, if you can let me know when everybody's in. We're already 4 minutes past, so we'd like to get going. Greg, you've unmuted. You want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Big crowd tonight. Big crowd tonight. Hi, Sherry. Hi, Derek.
Hi.
All right, and Anais, you just let me know when we're ready to go.
We can start.
All right. Well, as I said, this is a red letter day for Opimian. This is the first time, certainly virtually, that Opimians have had an opportunity to try the wines before they order the wines. And Karlo Estates has been working exceptionally hard. Thank you, Sherry, for actually getting these wines out to most of them. I will say that a few people didn't get them. There was some damage en route. And if you happen to be on the call, we wanted to say that we're going to be looking after you, and there will be another tasting very much like this before we close the offering, so that you do have the same opportunity as everybody. And in fact, if everybody wants to try to do it again, we'll be sending this out to everybody, and you can do it a second time if you like. So save a little bit of wine. No, don't save any wine. Yes, that's right.
You can't.
So I can't remember how many months ago it was, but Greg Reinhardt, one of our managing directors, went down to Prince Edward County, and he tried an awful lot of wine. And his favorite wine of the entire trip was from Karlo Estates. So he introduced himself to Sherry and her partner, Sachs. And as they say, the rest is history. Only the second Canadian wine that Opimian has represented since way back when. So we are so very honored to have you and Derek Barnett, who I was saying to Derek before we came live, was that I've heard lots of good things, and I've tasted lots of good things with regard to Derek. He's one of the foremost winemakers in Prince Edward County, or may I say in Canada. And Sherry and her partner Sachs are the vintners. And I'm going to put it right over to them so that we've got lots of time to taste. I hope that you've got your bottles with you. And I've got the 6-ounce ISO that we use for tasting, but any kind of glass will do. And if you want to drink right out of the bottle, that's okay too. So enjoy your evening, and over to you, Derek and Sherry.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having us this evening. I would just like to take a moment to formally introduce Derek Barnett as our winemaker, because he is one of the most gracious and humble people you will ever meet. So he will not say any of these things. So I have to say them before the evening gets away from us. So just to give you a bit of background about Derek, Derek is considered one of the most infamous winemakers in Canada. So how appropriate that the Opimian Society is inviting us and Derek's wines to the table. He's a bit of a grandfather in the industry, in that he's been mentoring a lot of the new and up and coming winemakers. The Canadian wine industry has become old enough that we have 2 generations of winemakers now, which is very encouraging. And not only was he named by Tony Aspler as winemaker of the year when he was at Southbrook, but as part owner and winemaker at Allstein Estates, they were on all the best wine lists. And when in 2015, he was named by the National Capital Sommeliers Guild as Wine Person of the Year, and is known for being the first to use Canadian oak to age Chardonnays. So I just wanted to let Derek tell you about his personal background in terms of where he's from and how he got into the business. But I just wanted to brag him about him a bit because I know he's not going to do that himself. So Derek, can you tell us how you got into winemaking?
Sure. That's the easy part of my job, right? I guess we emigrated back in '73 to Canada to milk cows on a large farm in north of Toronto, which was known as Donhead Farms, and it evolved over the 30 years that I was there. But it evolved into being Southbrook. So my first winemaking gig, having never made wine before, in 1991, 92, was with Southbrook. Those of you, I'm sure you all know where they are now, down in Niagara. But it was a fun way to begin in in winemaking. Let's just put it like that. And then in 2001, we opened Lely Vineyard, business partner with Donna Lely and her husband, and Tanya Lely and her husband. That was sort of 15 years of my winemaking life down there. And then after that was sold a little bit of my own product, which we shouldn't talk about, and began with sherry and Saks in 2015 vintage, I guess it was, right after Lely was purchased. So, I mean, I came at this without being a winemaker. We joked about it at Southbrook. We were wine drinkers. We knew exactly what we wanted to drink. We tried to sort of make those wines, and I think we still do the same today. Wines that are made for what all I will say is that I enjoy drinking, and as much as no, we'll leave it at that because it's just a simple way of finishing that.
Okay, so well, thank you for that, and I feel like I've been a little remiss because I know at Karlo we have a rule that the number one thing is you always have to have wine in your glass. So while we're talking, let's get some of this Three Witches into our glass. So this is what the full bottle looks like. But of course, everyone has these lovely little mini 5-ounce bottles. The reason we did 5-ounce was so that you can invite 5 friends over or 4 friends over and have a 1-ounce pour. Or if your sweetie doesn't want to have a glass of wine one night and you do, you can have a single glass of wine in one go. But I
think you can rest assured, Sherry, that Opinions will have drained these bottles by the end of this hour.
Okay. All right. So, well, I just thought let's go ahead and get the Three Witches into a glass. While you're doing that, I'll just quickly tell you the reason it's called the Three Witches is because we were trying to make a very versatile wine that would be a bit of a crowd pleaser, meant for entertaining. So this is 3 bewitching varietals that are conjure a crowd pleasing experience. Excuse all the puns, but I'll let Derek talk to you more about it, but we wanted something that would work well together on a table at a party where you have a white and a red. So that's what the Three Witches and the Triumvirate were designed to be from a functional standpoint. So they're both old world 3 blends, but this particular Three Witches has a bit of a twist to it. So let's get it into our glass, and then I'm going to pass it over to Derek and let him talk about the wines because I don't want to steal any thunder.
You can steal all the thunder you like. Not a big deal. This is kind of a fun wine. Fruit was all harvested separately, obviously, fermented separately. It's the blend is 50% Sauvignon Blanc, 25% Semillon, and 25% Gewürztraminer. It's never going to be the same from vintage to vintage. The nice thing about doing blends, as we all know, is the fact that you can juggle a little bit, change the percentages to give you the same sort of balance going through. And this, for me, was made in a sense to drink by itself, but would really pair well with food. I mean, we all like to talk about that, I know, but this is a special wine. It has lots of acidity, which comes from the Sem. There's a fair bit of warm fruit character from the goo, and the Sauvignon Blanc, I think it all ties it all together. There's a little bit of greenness, but not very much. And this from the 2020 vintage, actually, being a very ripe vintage down in Ontario, it gave us a little more weight. It also gave us a lot more fruit up front, which I think is sort of something we like to talk about a little bit. Everybody's got a very pleasing sense of ripe fruit on the front end of a wine, and I think this shows that very, very well.
Yeah, there's a few things on this wine for me. I always say it's crisp enough for the patio. It's smooth enough for a cocktail party because you don't have to have food with it, but it's also dry enough as a dinner wine. And I always talk about, like, this is my go-to. This on a Friday night with a bag of chips is all that for sure. Definitely. The other thing I wanted to mention is the reason why we allow the blend to change every year is because for us, winemaking is kind of like playing cards. You have to deal the best hand that the vintage presents. You have to play that hand and create the best wine that you can. So Derek has the flexibility to use his palate to decide that perfect ratio to create balance and structure in the wine and create the best wine that that vintage wants to create. So that's why we allow it to change from vintage to vintage.
I love the wine. I mean, I tend to drink my own wines a fair bit because as I said in the beginning, I enjoy drinking what I make, and that was the whole goal behind this. This in the last 6 months has evolved quite a lot in the glass. It gives me real viscosity in the mouth. It gives me that richness, and yet the acidity is such that the minute you've swallowed this, it sort of fills your mouth with saliva. It makes you want to have something to eat, but it's also very refreshing. And I just think it's a beautifully long wine, and not every vintage do we get this balanced so easily in our wines. This for me is sort of the best of both worlds, because I love texture in wine. I think texture is more important than a lot of things. We don't get a lot of alcohol normally in our wines naturally, which obviously gives us some texture, and we often don't get ripeness that we'd all like from harvest. 2021 being one of those.
Point.
So I just find this wine super balanced, and the flavors are all there. There's a little bit of the lemon there, which is the Sem. There's a little bit of tropical, which is the Goo, and then all of that sort of fresh yellow fruit that comes out from Sauvignon Blanc. Not too much greenness, simply because it was a brilliant warm year.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, every day at the end of the day, like my partner Sax, he's more of the business guy trying to teach me how to change from a fine artist into a business person. So one of our practices is to look at all the sales and actually analyze them. And I'm always impressed with how often Three Witches is the #1 seller in the portfolio. I mean, of course, in the summer and in a warm fall, because it's such a great versatile house wine, like it's not, I know some people don't like the word house wine because it's kind of has a derogatory connotation, but this wine is a crowd pleasing wine. It's an entertaining wine, and it's really great for the upcoming holiday season because it makes it really easy to help fill up a case and keep people happy.
Yeah, and if I may say, Sherry, that's not a derogatory term, in that if it's a crowd pleaser and people like it and it's easy drinking, that's all good. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure Derek agrees. And if I can say to the group that if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. You can, the chat button is down toward the bottom. If you press that, you'll get a bar around on the right hand side, and you can just type in there. And I have one for you, Derek. This is a fairly unusual blend, I would suggest, of these 3 varietals. Do you use these same 3 each vintage and just change the percentage?
We have been known to drop a little bit of Pinot Gris in, depending on the vintage. So I like what these 3 bring to the table every time we use them, and so we try to keep them the same. But we have used, say, a little bit of Pinot Gris. I find Gris gives it, as it ages anyway, it gives it this oiliness that I like out of Pinot Gris. Not many people are going to sit and throw this in their cellar. I'm pretty sure that you try and put this away, that there's always the next bottle until it's all gone. And so, but I do like letting the whites age in the cellar. I'm a bit of a fan of leaving things alone for a while. And as they do age over, 3 to 5 years and maybe even more, we haven't had that experience yet because we haven't made it longer than 5, but it does develop some nice richness, and the green does bring it together as well if you use that. We try to stick to only 3, so the year that we would put green, we would drop something else, otherwise the name gets all messed up. We'd have to have 4 witches or 2 witches.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's just too many witches.
But isn't it 4 witches around the cauldron, I think? So that would be okay.
Yes, for Macbeth. Yes,
That's
yes.
right.
Good point. So I don't know if anyone got any of the food pairings that we sent out in the email, but I got some chips here, and it's exactly true what Derek said, in that it makes you want to eat, and that's exactly what it's doing to me right now. So I hope no one minds if I slip a chip as we sip away here. Yeah, so I'm just thinking maybe we can tell you guys a little bit about Prince Edward County. It's one of the newer grape regions. It's not the newest anymore. We're not the new kids on the block anymore. Some of the wineries' vineyards are coming up on 20 years. I think a few other wineries, you know, they have celebrated their 20th year anniversary, which is great because I'm told that it takes about 25 years for a vineyard to become fully mature. And then the vines, correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, live for about 250 years. So it's our grandchildren that end up becoming, you know, that are laughing and scratching. And in the meantime, we're just but we have this obsession with making wine. The problem with Karlo Estates is that you've left winemakers who are culinary artists of beverage in charge with an artist who's trying to be a business person. So you've got, the reason we've got, I don't know is if it's 25 different grape varietals that we're like, or 25 different wines that we're working with, but we're trying to pare it down. But the problem with us is we're all kind of a little obsessive. And even Sachs, who's like supposed to be the business head in the whole equation, is a not a Pinophile, an oenophiliac. So it's every time we hear about anything that's out there available, we always want to get it and experiment with it and to push the boundaries. And that's one of the reasons why we invited Derek to come on board, was not only because of his exceptional talent, but his desire to tinker, and to push the boundaries and to experiment, and which led him to, you know, use Canadian oak for Chardonnays, which he's so well known for. One of the things I love about the Three Witches is the Semillon kind of is like that Bordeaux answer to Burgundy's Chardonnay, an unoaked Chardonnay. It's got that nice big broad mouthfeel. For me, the Semillon or the Sauvignon Blanc adds the citrus and the green grass, and this pink grape Gewürztraminer is adding a little bit of floral aromatics and tropical fruit. So it's a really versatile, complex, crowd-pleasing wine, and I'm really proud of it on behalf of the team, and I hope you guys like it as much as we do. It just recently won a medal at the National Wine Awards. That's it.
That recipe of personalities that you describe, of artistic personalities, it always ends up in either disaster or magic, and I think that you have discovered the latter in these wines. So congratulations. That's
Thank
excellent. You. And Greg is asking what kind of chips are best with this wine.
I personally love Costco's kettle chips. I love them because they're oily, and the oiliness balances the acidity in the wine, like balances with the acidity in the wine. It's already balanced. And the little bit of salt helps to simulate that dinner experience because it excites your palate and brings out the fruit. It's kind of like that notion of putting salt on an apple where it makes the apple sweeter. Or by the way, next time you have some watermelon, throw some salt on there and you're going to have an even more enjoyable watermelon. But I always like to get people to eat something at the winery with the foods, because cool climate wines Canadian wines are designed as food wines. So food is a really great way to show off how the wine's going to work when you have it at home and how it evolves once you introduce the food. And so this is something that, you know, we consider, or I don't consider, Derek and Spencer consider while they're making the wines. Is, you know, that salivating quality that makes you want to eat, and then what happens when you do eat. So if you have any pairings with you, please go ahead and enjoy them, because it's going to make the wine even more enjoyable, because cool climate wines are food wines. So A very elegant woman once taught me how to get another glass of wine at a dinner party without interrupting my host. And so would anyone like to know how to do that with a little show of hands?
Absolutely.
All right. So all you do, she came and talked to us after she ran her ponies. So she sat on the lawn and had her glass of wine. And she said, all you do is you very quietly, slowly, and very elegantly take the wine glass and place it on top of your head. And she said, I promise you, eventually your host will notice and you will get another glass of wine. But she did warn me. She said, if you take your hand away from your head, you will be cut off. And I would do that too here at Karlo Estates. So with that in mind, if you have another glass, we should probably go on to the next wine because we're trying to be cognizant of our time. And so our next wine is our 2018 Estate Malbec. And I have the little mini bottle here. And I have to tell you guys, whoever's in charge over there is really, really smart because they put a whole bunch of this wine on hold for everyone in the club. And it's a good thing they did because we are sold out to the general public. There is no more Estate Malbec 2018 available except to the Opimian Society. Or you don't call yourselves a society anymore, right?
No, we are the Opimian Wine Club.
The Opimian Wine Club.
We have moved into the 2000s.
I blame Sachs.
And hey, I forgot to mention, Sherry, that Sachs was one of the original members of Opimian. He's a charter member of Opimian. So that is just another connection between our two companies. So
a nice full circle.
It's so true. And thank you for putting these aside for us.
You're very welcome. There's a lot of other people who are not as grateful as I am for the order. They're like, what? So we were the first to plant Malbec in Prince Edward County. In fact, we're still the only ones to have planted Malbec in Prince Edward County. Everyone else thinks we're nuts. And a lot of the wine critics think we're nuts too, like because the county's known for Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. But my late husband, Richard Karlo's research was telling him that this Bordeaux grape varietal would ripen earlier than Cabernet Franc. And Cabernet Franc is known as one of the other darlings, the other brother of Prince Edward County and Ontario. So he thought, well, you know what, if we can ripen Cab Franc, we should probably be able to ripen the Malbec. And the thing is all the various local winemakers, including our neighbor across the street, would come across and say, oh, what are you going to do? Ripen it? What are you going to do? Put like mirrors in the vineyard? Like, how are you going to do that? And just would razz him and make fun. But it's been quite gratifying because since that time, those same winemakers have come back and they cannot believe the expression of this. I mean, it's more like a cool climate expression of Malbec, like a French cohort, but I mean, the county is the county. So it's a different terroir. It's a different experience. But if you wanted to find some characteristics that have similarities, then look to Cahors, France. We've had really great luck with this. People love Malbec in general. So it's a great wine that people are happy and willing and interested to taste. Luckily for us, Jennifer Huther, who is Canada's first female master somm, feels that this is the best of our portfolio from her point of view, for her palate. It's her favorite. And it's just been a real darling for us. It's doing really well in the vineyard. And luckily, Derek is willing to make some wine out of it.
This is such a fun gig. Malbec in the county. I've made Malbec for nearly 20 years now in Ontario. I find the similarities between Niagara and the county in character, they're very much the same, that the aromatics and the flavor profile. Just the one difference is that when you put this in your mouth, it's going to give you a freshness and it's going to give you almost a little citrus on the back palate. It's going to make you salivate just a little bit, not like white wine, but also not quite as soft as Malbec growing anywhere else in the world, as far as I'm concerned. So struggle a little bit to get this ripe every year. I mean, not going to say anything other than how I feel about this. I still think it's a crazy grape variety to grow in the county. However, we have been successful 5 out of the 6 years that I've made wine to get harvest. We've harvested as much as 3 tons to the acre in 2016, and we've obviously had one vintage where we had no crop due to some very inclement weather. So I mean, it comes at us in all different ways. There is that smell of, I'm going to go back to my youth really, but there's that smell of wet straw that when I put this in my up to my nose, I get this freshly harvested wheat field that's got the aromatics of the wet straw laying on the ground. I always get it in Malbec in cooler climates, and then I get all of that really dark fruit. This I always call crunchy when I talk about it. I mean, it feels like I've bitten into fresh fruit, and it's blueberry, it's blackberry, black raspberry. It's a little bit of an underripe plum tone because there is a little bit of greenness in the wine, and it's there. You can't hide it. It's would we like another 2 weeks to ripen it every year? For sure. But it comes across to me as something really well balanced, a definite food wine. I wouldn't want to sit around a pool and drink this in the afternoon by itself. I mean, for me, it doesn't work. So, but as far as food is concerned, I just think it balances big dishes. And one of my favorite foods to have with this is going to be portobello mushrooms. Again, that richness, that fatness, and which helps blend in with the acidity. So I mean, we make them traditionally. It's small batch, so it's fermented in small containers. It's punched down 2 to 3 times a day, depending on the stage of ferment. We tend not to leave it on the skins too long, not wanting to bring out too much tannin, because the wine still is fairly delicate. I mean, it's aromatic, it's delicate, it's pretty. If you get too much tannin, it's just going to kill the wine on the finish. And so we tend to not leave it on the skins too long. And then it spends pretty well almost 2 years in barrel, softening and aging, and very rarely new barrels. They're nearly all old barrels, both American oak and French oak. But it needs a little more time in wood to soften and to come around and to develop the fruit characteristics. But I really think it shows typicity. Not that we can compare to southern climes, but the characteristic is there. The flavors are there. The aromatics are there. It just has this different balance of acidity. I just love it. I could talk about it all night and drink it all night. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. And Derek, how long can you leave those grapes on the vine in Prince Edward County?
Well, regardless of how long we'd like to leave them, they've got to come off before the end of October. We need a couple of weeks for the vine to go dormant after the harvest has gone on, and then before we can lay them down and bury them, they need to be dormant. So realistically, we tend to harvest the last week of October. So as long as we can keep leaves growing, we're able to ripen them a little bit. I mean, this year has been a bit of a struggle. We did harvest a little bit earlier. We had some, like everybody else, wet and humid. I mean, incredibly wet and humid weather late in September, which carried on through most of October, which caused us grief with fungus in the vineyard, and realistically can do very little about it because we're so close to harvest. We couldn't attack it with anything. So it was a bit of a shame, but mostly we get physiological ripeness if we can leave them till the end of October.
Right. And then how long would you lay these down? Greg's asking.
I'm a big fan of minimum 5 to 7 years. I always get concerned when I tell people about laying wine down, because I know as they evolve. I mean, if you're used to laying wines away, then hey, that's great. And I like to tell people that I've got no problems telling you this will lay away for 10 years. quite happily. The acid balance is there. The alcohol is not, the fruit's not going to dry out because of the acid. The alcohol is not too heavy, so it's not going to overtake anything either. So, I mean, you've got to be able to keep it in balance. So I think this is a wine that I could sit around and think about 7 to 10 years from now, pulling out of the cellar and enjoying.
Yeah, it's fresh right now.
It is.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And everybody should see that we've got a lot of foodies on this call, obviously. If you look in the chat, if you haven't looked yet, there's lots of food pairing recommendations that people have done with both of these wines so far. I'm sure we'll get some with the third. That is excellent. I'm enjoying that very much. Was this the one you were crushing for next year, half an hour before you came on the call?
You know, I was in Niagara-on-the-Lake and doing some work with Cabernet Franc and the last pick of some tiny blocks of Gewürztraminer. It's been just stupidly late and in trying to get these things to ripen, and so yeah, I was busy. So doing a little bit for my own company down in Niagara.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I love these things.
So I guess I'm asking all the questions. There are no questions on the chat, but please feel free. If I haven't covered something you just need to know, please let us know.
Yeah, it's Derek and I don't often get to do a tasting together, so it's interesting to do that. Because usually we kind of like, do our own things. He's either doing the tasting or I'm doing the tasting, and we rarely get to do it together. So it's interesting because I feel like I have my own spiel and he has his spiel. So it's interesting to see the two kind of coming together.
And Sherry, are you in the barn right now?
I am in our wine lounge. And if you like, I can quickly get up and walk around. So I'm in what we call the Bieber Lounge. So you get your own little fireplace. It is on a TV screen, but hey, it's still a fireplace, and it has a nice.
And you have the heat on too, right? So.
And we have the heat on, and this is one of our latest acquisitions, is a new Tiffany lamp for the wine lounge. And so we have different pods, and we have this is the living room. So we have a a virus killing HEPA filtration system. This is actually one of the holes. But it lets us suck up air from each pod so that you don't have any cross contamination of other people's cooties while you're in the wine lounge. So we, during COVID, spent our first lockdown investing in that. This is our main bar in the wine lounge. So it's basically an 1805 post and beam barn that we kind of zhuzhed with a whole bunch of Persian rugs and button tufted sofas that probably your grandmother has in her basement somewhere. And this is our winter tasting lounge, or when it's sweltering hot outside. It's also air conditioned in the summertime. So it's a great place to come and hide. And in the Bieber Lounge, this is our little VIP area. This is where we also sometimes have some corporate meetings after we close. And we have been known to try some beer in this lounge as well, because of course, there's a saying in the industry that it takes a lot of beer to make good wine. So Derek, I hear that that's because when you're wine tasting all day long, it's kind of sweet on the palate and you need something bitter to cut your palate before you go home at night. Is that it?
Last thing I need is another glass of wine. Thank you very much. With this accent, you have to have a beer. I mean, there's just nothing else to go with it. However, we're always very careful just to have a little bit, for drinking and driving purposes. It's hard.
Yes, we all have our smart serves.
Normally finish our corporate meetings, I get in my car and drive 3.5 hours back to Niagara. So it's always a bit of a constraint.
You need to get him a cot there, Sherry, so he doesn't have to.
Yes, we actually had one. And then we, unfortunately, during that horrible frost that did a lot of damage in the vineyard one year, it also, it's kind of a long story, but it ended up in our, what we affectionately called the wine lair, which was our guest, kind of like a hovel, I guess you could call it. Derek would often stay there, but then unfortunately there was a freak frost. What was it? 2000, what year was that? 2017 or?
I don't know, but it was cold and someone turned the heat on.
Yeah. So what happened was there was a freak frost and it froze the pipes. Normally we would blow out the pipes and close the wine lair in December for the season, but there was a freak frost that year in November. I think it was 2019, it feels like. And so it froze the pipes. So then we knew there was a thaw coming. So we thought, okay, someone had the idea of putting some heaters underneath the trailer to thaw the pipes. And unfortunately, something went wrong. There's a little spark or something, and the wrong spark hit the wrong amount of propane tank underneath the wine lair. And unfortunately, when we came back the next morning, there was no wine lair. So one of our goals this year is, one of my goals is to build Derek his own bunkie in vineyard side so that he can spend more time here. It's been an interesting thing though, with the last year and a half, 2 years now with COVID. Luckily Derek likes to drive, so he doesn't mind driving home that night, but we're going to fix that. We are on it. We're getting there.
Oh, go ahead.
All right. So what time are we at now? So we are at...
We've got 20 minutes. And if we go a little over, I'm sure no one will care.
Awesome. Well, I've got another empty glass. How's everyone else out there doing? Do you guys want to continue to enjoy the Malbec, or, oh, we got some glasses on heads. Okay, that's
yes.
My symbol. That helps me. Thank you. All right. So we're going to move on to the final wine of the evening, which is our Triumvirate. So this is the counterpart to our Three Witches, in that they are old world blends. And this was named Triumvirate because actually Sachs named this wine. It was the first wine that he named when he came on board in 2015. And triumvirate is an ancient Roman term that refers to three emperors ruling together for balanced government. So in this case, because it's a classic Meritage or Bordeaux blend, it's using each varietal to kind of fill in the holes of the next for the smoothest, longest taste profile possible. So as Sachs would say, there is no tyrant in this blend because it's all about creating harmony and balance, which is a part of Derek's signature touch in winemaking. So I'm going to open this, and then maybe Derek, you can talk more about it while I struggle with the corkscrew.
Yes, we haven't evolved into screw caps, have we?
No.
No. Throw those
Lord forbid. No.
Would make your life much easier right now. This is a predominantly Merlot blend, so 70% Merlot, 25% right Cab Franc, and 5% Cab Sauv. I like Merlot blends. I think that they work super well. Certainly in Ontario, we have this, which we were just talking about, nasty sort of end to most falls. We never seem to be able to get to the end of fall without frost, or get to the end of our ripening period without having to worry about getting things right. Merlot is always the first to come off of the Bordeaux varietals, and therefore we are able to get really good maturity in the grapes. Cab Franc got far behind. It's the Sauv that's always the trouble, getting the Sauv to come off at complete ripeness in a timely fashion. So anyway, I mean, much like the Three Witches, we're fermenting separately. They're harvested, crushed, destemmed, and punched down again by hand to make our blends. I'm a tyrant I love punch downs. I must admit, one of my favorite times of the year. Even as I get older and older, I find it harder and harder. I have to get the step ladder a little bit higher so I can get enough weight to push the cup down. But those aromatics that come out of punch downs are just incredible. And from the time I started making wine in 91, 92, I don't think I've ever done pump overs ever. I've had that luxury, and I love how you can follow the changing of wine on a daily basis during punch downs, when you push that cap in and the air or the CO2 comes out and brings all the flavor. So I still get a big kick out of that this time of year. Anyway, they're all hand punched down, and majority are at the time it's 18 to 21 days on skins before we gently press and age in barrel for I want to say between 16 and 18, sometimes 20 months for these. We would rack them at about 6 months and make a decision on the wines themselves and what we would want to use to blend. They would be blended at that point between 6 and 8 months, and then they would go back into barrel as a blended wine and would continue aging in the same barrels until we decide that we're ready to bring them out. Sometimes we fight because we like to have wines on the shelf a little bit sooner, but I still think that there is this evolution of wine, and I love to see them to the end of what I think is their time in barrel before we put them into a bottle. This has just, for me, this is all about red fruit. There's a savory note to it, which I think is indicative of cooler climates. There's a little bit of oak. There's not. Again, I'm a big proponent of older barrels, and I really don't think that we need to use a lot of new oak. If you want new oak, then there's other parts of the world you can find it balances better. We struggle all year long to get our fruit ripe and the flavors right in the vineyard. To put it in a new barrel and overpower it is sort of something I just don't want to do. We've been there, done that 20 years ago, and I think that we've seen what Ontario can do as a wine region in producing our wines. They're always going to be elegant, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not worried about climate change in the vineyard, because I'm not going to be here worrying about those 15% alcohols and overly ripe fruit. That won't happen in my lifetime. But
no, only Sherry has to worry about that.
But I just love the way this wine has evolved, and it has that, as I say, that savory note. There's not much tannin in the wine, again, by design. I like them to be soft. It's going to age for another 5 to 7, I think, quite happily. But I think that the deal is that I want them to drink young as well. Not everybody wants to put wine away in a cellar, so you have to give them the choice. And I think that this wine shows that it has the stuffing to lay away, but also it drinks nicely now. And if you want to decant it for an hour or two beforehand, I think that will also work. But I really find the fruit red and sweet, and sometimes a little bit jammy. Today, I find it really jammy in the palate. I find it a little bit riper than I remember the last bottle I opened. But I'm not saying there's bottle variation. Maybe it's my mood, and we've got the heat on in the house, and maybe I'm just a little bit warmer, and I can smell and taste things a little bit differently because it's warmer where I am. So.
I out of the portfolio, I really enjoy the old world aspect of this wine, not only because of the blend itself, but the approach of it, and the darkness and those earthy tones, that little bit of cigar box, and I just spilled it down my top there. It's time to end the call. I've had too much to drink.
Put a glass on your head.
Yeah. That's right. Oh dear. This is why I wear burgundy. This is exactly why.
Good thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And Derek, I know it sounded like you didn't want to talk about climate change, but so you're not worried about it in the short term, that like everybody says that Ontario is going to be the new Bordeaux. How do you react to that statement?
That was okay in 2020. I'm not sure anybody's talking about that in 2021. Yes, there's certainly. I'm not saying there's no change. I think we have to make changes to lifestyle, to how we're producing fuels and everything, really, because we are slowly having climate change. But every winter we have frost here. Every winter
you're actually burying your vines.
Right? Sherry's talking about how we need 25 years to get the vineyard in shape, and then they should be okay for another 250. My word, in Prince Edward County, if they're good for 25 years and they're going to be good for another 25, I think we should be really happy. We have serious frosts. We have damaging frosts every 4 or 5 years in Niagara. I'm going to say 3 years out of 10, we still have great vintages in Niagara. Another 3 years out of 10, we have really good ones, and then the other 4 are often tough and
call them difficult.
Difficult. All right. So I do believe that we are getting longer seasons. I mean, we haven't had a frost where I am in Niagara yet. Everywhere else has, even in Central France on the lake, they had frost and a little bit of snow last night, but we haven't where I get most of my grapes from. And so the season is I think becoming longer. Obviously the worry of that is in the spring, we seem to get earlier springs, but we always get those nights where we're paranoid and we turn the fans on because we have to keep the frost off the young shoots. So I'm not discounting climate change one little bit, because it is happening, because we do see this longer season. And then we get years like 2020 and 2017 and 2016, 2012, I can go on, but there are the vintages that we all sit down and go, wow, this wasn't any work at all. I mean, we just had to wait for the right day, the sun was shining, and to go out and harvest our grapes. But then there are others that no different than Bordeaux, but we just don't get that long fall in general every year to get our grapes where we would all like them, I guess. But I certainly, we should be concerned, but I don't think it's going to happen as fast as we think.
Yeah. So we'll continue to have a New World style compared to the Old World style, right?
Sorry?
We'll have a New World style of this Meritage or Meritage, right?
I think that will likely happen, and we'll get better ripeness, not better ripeness, we'll get riper with higher alcohols, which I think bring a whole new thing to wine tasting. I mean, if we're going to make wines like Napa here, what the heck are Napa going to make?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's
whiskey.
But if they'll be making port on the vine, for me, it's. I think if we had consistency of vintages, I'd be much happier as a winemaker. But I do believe that one of the cool things about being in a cool climate is the climate variation. It every year is a little bit different, and we try to be consistent. But I think that there's some fun in making wines from not so great vintages and making great wines from not so great vintages, and that surprise for people with what's in their glass.
And if you want it to be the same every year, just buy Yellowtail, right?
Exactly.
But this is bespoke. And Sherry, are you seeing Jill's question there in the chat about the port?
Yes, I was actually thinking that Derek might be a good person to answer that question, because I do recall a certain text that came late at night one night when you were testing the port. Weren't you drinking that 2008 port, very vintage, about 2 months ago?
I was. So I didn't see the question. So without my glasses, I can't see anything.
So it says, we have a Karlo 2008 port unopened. Will it still be good?
I think that it was brilliant. We opened one not long ago, and I sent you a picture. It was pretty spectacular, and it was in what we call it. I mean, it was a blind tasting with a good friend of mine in the industry here, and he likes to play silly games, and Stump the Chump was the game we were playing, and it was in the glass, and nobody pegged it for a fortified wine from Ontario. It was ripe, it was rich, it was made from 100% hybrid grapes. I'm pretty sure it was 100% Frontenac Noir.
Yep.
And it was so rich and beautiful. I was sad I was driving again because I wanted another glass. It was brilliant. So if you've got one in the cellar, I'm not saying you should open it because it's going over the top, but I'm just saying you should open it because it was pretty spectacular.
So good. Yes, it does you no good in the cellar if it's ready to drink, right?
No.
No, that's so true.
Yes.
And
so,
Michael, I think we're offering a nice mix pack of fortified this month as well from Karlo, which has done nicely for sales. People are from coast to coast sneakily buying that one.
Yeah, I have to say,
thank you, Ray.
It's definitely, 'tis the season for fortified wines. They're really great as a little amuse-bouche when people first arrive, to help them warm up, relax, get that party started. And of course, after dinner as well. They're great for when the family comes over, because if you like your family, you're going to have a better time. If you don't like your family, they'll go to bed early. So either way, it's a win-win. But we have the Allstein White, which is a white port style wine. It was actually a spontaneous mutation that happened with the Frontenac Noir in the vineyard. It spontaneously mutated into Frontenac Gris, and then again the next year into one vine becoming albino and being Frontenac Blanc. And then we had our vigneron from Quebec, Alain Béraud, come down, and he harvested the entire vine and then grafted it to rootstock and propagated about, how much do we have in the vineyard, Derek? I think it's like a couple.
Very much.
rows.
3 rows. We harvested like 700 kilos this year. That's all. I mean, and we have had better years, but we average sort of, I would have said, a ton of fruit each vintage.
But yeah, it's been extremely successful for us. The fortified Van Alstyne Red, the ruby port, is port style. Sorry, we're not allowed to call it port because it's a sanctioned term.
Not from Portugal.
It's not from Portugal, so we refer to it as a port style or fortified. But we were the first. Karlo was the first to make this style of wine in 2008 in our first vintage, and then we were the first to make a white port style wine as well. And they've both been extremely successful for us. In our first vintage for the Van Alstyne Red, it was named by John Szabo, Canada's first master somm, as one of the top 10 cutting edge wines in the world. And that's because it's a little bit lower in alcohol than a traditional port. Most are between 19 to 24. This is more like 17.5, 18%. So not quite as hot on the palate. And it's also a little bit drier. One of the bit of feedback that we've gotten over the years is some people don't like port because they find it too cloying, which means too sweet, and they find it too hot, which is too high in alcohol. So we reduce the alcohol level. It's a little bit drier, and Frontenac as a grape varietal is actually very naturally high in acid. So even though there's a lot of sweetness to the wine, the acidity in the wine leaves your palate clean. So it's not cloying at all. And then the Van Alstyne White won the only gold medal in the International Intervin Awards in its first vintage. And we have a local wine agency here called the Cellar Sisters, and they have accused it of being heaven in a glass. So they've both been very, very popular wines, really great for the holiday season. You can use them as an after dinner wine, just with like a plate of soft cheeses, or like with the white, with something to do with a blonde taste profile. So creme brulee, cheesecake, vanilla ice cream, apple strudel, pecan pie, pumpkin pie. With the reds, anything to do with chocolate. So hunks of dark chocolate and salted nuts, or something decadent like a German chocolate lava cake with raspberry sorbet and fresh raspberries. But of course, the most traditional pairing would be like a blue, I personally love blue Stilton cheese, made with cashews, actually, as a little twist. And because the acidity or the sharpness of the blue balances the sweetness of the fortified, and the creaminess of the cashew balances the acidity in the wine. So it's one of those bucket list taste experiences that you have to have before you die, because it's that good. And they're really great because there's a lot of tradition around fortified wines in the military. The first thing that happens when a bottle of port is opened is a journeyman takes the cap and runs far, far away, because the entire bottle has to be consumed that night. So they're really great to share with your friends and family as we're moving into sharing time, some downtime. With the military, when the army passes the port around a mess table, they always slide it to the left-hand side, but they slide it along the table because they're ground infantry. With the Air Force, they don't ever let the bottle hit the table at all. It's never allowed to be placed down. And with the Navy, they actually stand on their chairs while they pass the bottle around. So they're really nuts. But there's lots of really great traditions, and lots of really new ways to use fortified wines as well. Conrad Edgebeck, who's one of Canada's more senior and established wine critics, created a drink on his CBC call-in radio show And he created what he called a Wellington, because Wellington is the closest town to us. It's based on a Manhattan, but what he did was he took 2 parts Allstein White. He put it into a martini shaker and on over ice added 1 part Weiser spiced whiskey, which is spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg. And then he shook it and poured it neat into a martini glass and added a preserved cherry, not a maraschino cherry, but the kind of cherry your grandmother, if she lived in Cherry Valley here in Prince Edward County, would make. And I will warn you, it is dangerously delicious. It will take you from all the way from American Thanksgiving all the way to New Year's. We've also had people use it almost like, is it a cassis that you would put into like a Prosecco to make
the
nice
Kier,
little,
Kier
yes,
Royale. Yeah.
yes, to do just a little splash of it into a Prosecco to make a nice garden party. Or, you can also have, because Frontenac Blanc and the whole Frontenac family is so intense in color, it can take dilution. So it's a really good candidate to use in a spritzer. I mean, I know Richard would roll over in his grave to hear me say that, but that way you can use soda water. I like tonic water. It adds another level of complexity, but that way you can enjoy it all day long and you don't pass out. So, because it is a higher alcohol wine, so it can take dilution. You can also use it to make things like white sangrias or red sangrias. So it's a fun wine to play with. It's kind of not exactly like a real port. I have heard people feedback saying that it's halfway between a rich red wine and a port style wine. So it's kind of its own unique thing.
So I'm going to stop you there, Sherry. We've got a bunch of questions in the chat that I'd like to get answered, and we do want to tell them about this dinner as well. So,
Okay.
So for the first question here was about the Quintus. Can we talk a little bit about that, each of you?
Sure. So Quintus, the whole reason we started Karlo Estates was to create our Holy Grail wine, which was to eventually get all 6 of the original Bordeaux grape varietals into one bottle, which has rarely been done since the late 1800s after the phylloxera epidemic, where root louse almost completely wiped out the entire French wine industry. Luckily, they had the forethought to send a whole bunch of grapes down to South America. So that's why we think of certain grape varietals like Carmenere and Malbec as South American grapes, but they're really Bordeaux grapes. So we would try to do it every year, but it's very, very hard to get all 6 grape varietals and even to source them, let alone have them ripen and be beautiful fruit. So it's always our goal to make what we call sextus, which is Latin for 6. But when we've only been able to do that once, but in the year that in good years, we're able to make Quintus, which is 5 of the 6 Bordeaux grape varietals. So typically Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec, and Petit Verdot, not necessarily in that order. Again, they're all made as individual grape varietals, and then we blend. Derek figures out the perfect ratio, that perfect blend to, create that best expression for that particular vintage. But I think Derek is better to speak about the Quintus than I am in terms of a winemaking standpoint. So I'll pass it over to you, Derek.
Well, there's much more I can say. I mean, it's made in the same style as we would make Triumvirate, and yet we just use another 2 grape varieties. I mean, looking for all intents and purposes, we're just again making that wine with the balance, with the flavor profile. I mean, when we talk about Petit Verdot and Malbec, they're smaller varieties. I think the Quintus that's on the shelf is like 5% or 4% Petit Verdot in it. So, I mean, they're not easy grapes to source and not easy grapes to grow in Ontario. Malbec is lucky more difficult to grow and ripen every year than just because of the winter months than Petit Verdot. So, I mean, realistically, the wine is a richer stylistically than Triumvirate. It's got a little more weight to it, and it will have a little more alcohol normally. We only make it really in the best years, and hopefully that we can harvest a little bit of Carmenere from the home property, which normally comes off in dribs and drabs and small bits. And so, but to get them completely ripe in Ontario, let alone in the county, is unusually difficult, and so but that's really what it boils down to. I mean, it's trying to make that wine with balance, and as I say, a little bit bigger, or maybe a lot bigger than the Triumvirate.
And very small batch, yes?
Very small batches, that's right.
Yes. Oh, right.
Yeah, I find the Quintus is kind of like two notches. Like for me, like the Petit Verdot adds a little bit of acidic structure and depth of color, and the Melback adds a little bit more pepper and almost like a pin cherry or a cranberry, little bit of accent. So I'm getting a lot more complexity out of the Quintus. They're both really beautiful wines. And I think the Triumvirate is a steal of a deal because, I have to be honest with you guys because I'm always honest and I can't seem to edit my thoughts. But this is the kind of wine that if we were sitting around trying to price it just based on market value and the taste profile and all that sort of thing, I think we would be, being in like the high 30s for the price of this. But we approached the portfolio from a portfolio pricing standpoint, and we realized that certain wines have functions for the winery in order to help drive traffic. So restaurants, in order to have wine by the glass, have to hit certain price points in order to be able to move that product in a rapid state so that it makes sense. So we reduced the price of the Triumvirate. And the thing is with wine, because it's a controlled substance, we're not allowed to change the price between what we would sell to one customer to another. So because we want to sell it to high-end restaurants and private clubs, we made it the price point workable for wine by the glass menus. But if we weren't doing that and we were just selling it from the farm gate, it would be a much more expensive wine. So I just think in terms of all of the wines that are on offer, from my point of view, I think the Triumvirate is just a steal of a deal. It's a really great value wine.
And then we'll wrap this up fairly soon, but did want you to talk a little bit about the bubbles. I think Sherry, you were on the road when I called to get some samples of the bubbles, and your staff told me they were sold out, which had me panicking quite a bit. and then I understand you've put some of that aside for us as well, even though no one else can buy it. So thank you for that. But do you want to the two of you talk a little bit about the bubbles?
Yeah, the one thing I will say is, we always, as the mentorship that I've gotten as an entrepreneur is that you bring people who are smarter than you to the table and you let them bring their craft and do their thing. So you got to leave people room to make mistakes. So when we were thinking, okay, we want a bubble because everyone keeps asking us for some sparkling wine, especially as a reception wine. We do a lot of private club stuff. We thought, okay, well, let's ask Derek. Let's beg Derek to make some bubble. And we thought it would be like that first pancake that you make on a Sunday morning, when the temperature of the frying pan's not quite right. So it ends up being burnt on the outside and all runny on the inside. So you put it aside and you eat that yourself because eventually you get the pan right. Well, that's kind of what we thought would happen. But we were able to release it just in time for the All Canadian Wine Awards. And I will tell you, we were absolutely delighted to find out that it won a gold medal at the All Canadian Wine Championships. So I always say to people when I taste the bubble with them that there is absolutely no pressure for you to buy this wine because I will happily drink it all myself. So please do not feel obligated to buy this wine. I'm more than happy to drink whatever's left over from what we put aside for the Premium Society.
And may I say, don't listen to her.
But I think Derek's better to talk about the wine itself and what it's made up of and that whole experience of that first go for us.
I've only spent 31 years in the business, and this is my first sparkling wine. So I've been bullied. No, that's unfair. I always thought that if I wanted to make one, I wanted to make it traditionally, and I always thought I wasn't going to have enough time in my life to let things age for 5 years and bring what I thought was great to the table. So having long discussions about this, I sort of relented and said, okay, well, let's make bubble. And I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be, I remember in the mid to late 90s being at the London Wine and Food Show. And we were, when I was with Southbrook, and one of my favorite bubbles that I had ever drank was Sauvignon Blanc from I can't remember the company name, it doesn't really matter, but it was from South Africa, and it was just superb. And it was like £6 a bottle, which at that time would have been $12 a bottle, and it was just phenomenally. So I sort of said to Sherry, let's make it Sauvignon Blanc, and let's have some fun with that. And I know there's a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc used for sparkling wines in Ontario, but I just thought it would be kind of a neat flavor profile. And when we, I guess the end result is that we enjoyed it better when we blended some Semillon into it, and I had access to some Semillon. And by the time we finished, we had a 55% Sauvignon Blanc and a 45% Semillon blend that when fermented separately, blended together, and was just phenomenal. And again, 20 vintage, really ripe, and we maybe let them hang a little bit too long on the vine. It's not traditional in that early pick. And so I will preface all of your drinking experiences with that bubble. It's 13.1% alcohol, but you don't know it's there, which is the scary part. Anyway, it was made in a Charmat style, which means it was taken away into from the fermenting vessels into closed tanks, and where it re-fermented a little bit, leaving us about 10 grams of residual sugar for balance, because the acid on the Sem is always pretty bright. So I think we ended up making this phenomenally brilliant, drinkable, sparkling wine that shows a little bit of tropical, a little bit of citrus, and a whole lot of body. And it's just a beautiful bottle of wine. I drink it as much as I can get it. I drink it because I just, I'm not a big sparkling wine drinker, and I've drank more sparkling wine this summer than I think I have in 10 summers previously. It's that good. I mean, and I'm not just bragging because I made it. It is that good, and we've had so much great feedback from the wines. But that's what it is, and I think this year's is pretty well the same again. It's a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Sem. I love the character that the wine brings to the bubble. So yeah, I'll be quiet now.
And I can tell you that Sherry and Derek are not the only ones that love that wine. So,
That's so good.
Greg's already said so, and that bottle that I finally wrested from your closed hands, I really enjoyed as well. So
Yeah, so don't buy any, don't buy any, don't buy any.
And
I
so,
want it.
so we're already over time, but let me talk about the dinner, and then we'll answer Steve's question about vegan certified, and then we'll let everybody get on with their nights.
Right.
So just everybody on the call, you are going to get first dibs on a very limited number of seats at Karlo Estates for a dinner on Friday, December 3rd. It is going to be 4 sit-down plates with matching wines, and Sherry assures us that you won't go without wine and food as you arrive as well, in addition to those. And it's by an excellent chef, Bailey Stalker. And you are going to get an invitation to this dinner tomorrow, and that is in advance of anybody else in Opimian. So you will need to register for these seats before Sunday, because Monday it goes out to all of the Opimian members for that. So, and Steve's already asking for suggestions where to stay. So we'll get to that too, Steve. But so just be sure to watch for this email that you're going to get tomorrow, and please make a decision by Sunday, because it's going to sell out exceptionally fast. So we'll leave it up to that. Steve will answer that. But first, Steve will answer about what vegan certified wine is. Sherry?
Sure. So the vegan certified wine is, there's a Canadian body called VegaCert that certifies that the liquid in the bottle itself is vegan, meaning that we don't use any animal products during the production of the wine. So you might be saying, what are you talking about? I thought grape wine was made out of grape juice and grapes are fruit. So how could that not be vegan? Well, there's 3 times during the winemaking process that will determine whether the liquid itself is vegan or not. And the first is during the fining process. So after we crush and destem the grapes, there's little bits of seeds and skins and must floating around in the wine. And Derek has told me that if we use enough time and gravity, anything will precipitate out. But sometimes very big, like some wineries, be them big and industrial or whatever the case, they may need to go faster than what time and gravity will allow, be that cash flow or inventory or whatever the case may be. So they'll push something heavy and gelatinous through the wine to act like a French press and push all of those things, all those particles down to the bottom of the tank. And then there's a valve at the bottom of the tank. They first use a pony pump to rack off the wine. So meaning that they're taking, it's almost like separating an egg from an egg white, yolk from an egg. They're taking the clear wine and putting it into another tank. And then they open up that valve and drain off the lees or the sludge or the must or whatever you want to call it. So sometimes winemakers will use things like isinglass, which is sturgeon fish swim bladders and scales, casein, which is powdered milk, alum, I believe, which is egg whites. And back in the day, back in the olden days, they would even use things like pig's blood or ox blood, because again, it's heavy and gelatinous. So we don't do that. We generally use time and gravity. You'll notice a lot of our vintages are kind of really behind because we don't have as many erasers in our toolbox. So we have to do it right the first time and take our time and go slow. But if we ever do need to put something through the wine, we use what's called bentonite clay. And the great thing about bentonite clay is not only is it of the earth, but when it is wet, the molecules the particles reform themselves to create a brick structure so that nothing can get past that layer of clay. And then of course that pushes everything down and you rack it off and you have your clean wine. So that's the first thing. The second part is right before we bottle, a winemaker can adjust acids or tannins in a wine to help to balance the wine. This might be because they're trying to age the wine a little faster, or they're just trying to clean up the wine before it goes into bottle. And again, this goes back to where we make it right the first time because we don't have as many erasers to use. But for us, traditionally, a winemaker will use some sort of protein because the acids and tannins in the wine will adhere to that protein and it becomes a heavier particle. And then again, it precipitates out. For us, we use potato protein, pumpkin protein, pea protein. So we're basically putting a vegan smoothie through the wine if we ever want to adjust acids and tannins. And then the third process is the process of chapitalization. There are 2 times when you may choose to chapitalize a wine. The first is during the fermentation process. So if a winemaker wants to raise the level of alcohol higher than what the natural sugars present in the juice will allow, they might feed the wine a little bit of sugar. The other time is for, say, an aromatic white, like a Riesling or Gewürztraminer, you might add a wee bit of sugar just to, winemaking is kind of like making that perfect lemonade. You're balancing the acid with the sugar in the juice to create that perfect lemonade. So there might be a year where, given the weather conditions, maybe there's more acid present than there is sugar. So you might add just a little touch just to lift the fruit and round out the mouthfeel. The problem with most sugar is it's not vegan because it's bleached using animal bones or animal char. For us, all of our wines are dry table wines. They are naturally fermented down to less than 3 grams, which the human palate can't detect sweetness once it's under 3 grams. So they're all dry. All of our table wines are dry. Our fortified wines, we do use a little bit of sugar in there to balance the alcohol and the acids in the wine. And so for that, we use Red Path, which is not only accidentally vegan, but it's also local because there's not only a facility on the lakeshore in Toronto, but there's also a facility in Belleville. So it's really great for us. we're trying to be good, responsible stewards of the land, and to look for ways to reduce our carbon impact. And this is one way for us to do that. So those are the three things that talk about the actual wine itself. But we actually take it a little further than that, because we don't have any animal inputs in the vineyard. And all of our glue on our labels is made of silicone. So it's a oil-based plastic. And then the inks themselves on the labels are also vegetable dyes. So, and then all of our food offerings are also plant-based. So we don't go in for frankenfood or weird stuff, because even I don't know what that is, and I don't want to eat it either. But we focus on whole food, plant-based, locally sourced, as natural as possible. The kind of stuff your grandmother would pull out of her kitchen garden. And even Sax and myself are also vegan. I have a huge love for animals, so that's why I am. And Sax has been a environmentalist from a very, very young age. So it's just something we both feel passionate about, and we think it's a great opportunity to, like 95% of what's edible on the planet is plant-based. So it's a great opportunity to try new things. And so we just think it's fun. Like I love to cook, and one of the things I enjoy the most is, like Derek said, texture is so important. So for me, it's trying to come up with a food genre that people relate to, like shepherd's pie or spaghetti, and I don't know, like lasagna, but do it in a plant-based whole food way that is creating the same texture profile and the same taste profile to get that same wonderful, yummy experience.
Okay.
Very long answer. Sorry.
Well, I can tell that we've hit on something that's very important to you, and you know it well. And Derek, I don't think you need to add anything there, do you?
Not a heck of a lot. I
No.
can tell you the only thing we add now in the winery, in our production, is bentonite. It's the only thing that we do, and all white wines will have bentonite added to them, simply because it actually takes out proteins. If we don't bentonite the wines and take out the proteins that are within those wines, if you don't store your wine properly, and I have no idea what you do with your wines when you take them home, if the temperature goes up too much, the proteins will precipitate by themselves and the wine will go cloudy. So we have to bentonite all of white wines that we produce. We don't do any fining with reds. They all happen naturally, and then we do filter before bottling, but there is no additives anywhere in the building at all.
And I can say a little bit of bentonite clay in the clay mix makes really good pottery as well. So
I'm sure.
that's right. So thank you so much for having joined us, Sherry and Derek. We really appreciate it, and all of the opinion members who ordered the samples, and for bringing your samples along and doing this. This was just so brilliantly fun. And and Steve, I've checked with Anais, and we'll find you non-layer Acamo near that. And I checked it a couple of days ago, and Belleville's only 23 minutes away, so there's lots of hotels up that way. And then I bet you, Sherry, you've got a list that we can send out with the invite. So if you could send that to Anais, that would be great.
I will definitely do that. I have to say, I don't get out much. It's like Hotel California around here. You can check out anytime. You can have a glass of wine anytime you like, but you can never leave. But I do like to live vicariously through our clients. So I'm kind of like the Cliff Clavin of what to do in the county. So I will definitely send you a list of a lot of great options of places to stay in and around the county.
Thanks again. And thank you, Anais, as always, for running the board. Really appreciate it. And we will see everybody again very soon. Hey, don't forget to order before November 8th, no matter what Sherry tells you.
No, leave it for me.
Good night, everybody. Take care.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Night, everyone.
Night. Take care.